Hello, everyone. Got Brett in today. Really glad to see him again. And we were actually talking about language in the practice and also kind of a skillful reinforcement of beneficial, you could say, trainings, right? So when we're practicing Anapanasati or inhale, exhale, remembrance. That's how I kind of like putting it in English. But often known as mindfulness with breathing. So when we're training these skills or we're coming on like Sangha calls, kind of having a skillful reinforcement of that, of a wholesome, positive, But even positive sometimes is sort of like, I find it's helpful to even examine that. So it's examining the language. But yeah, coming back to that, because we were just going over how beneficial it is. Like, I'm like, this is so beneficial for me, coming on these chats and hosting them. And Brett and I had a talk the other day where we went for like 2 hours just talking about the Dhamma. So again, it was really cool talking to you, Brett, for that amount of time and being able to communicate. And we do have a fair bit, in common. And it was really nice to be able to have those connections because that support of Sangha is really, really beneficial. My practice has improved exponentially since connecting with other practitioners and having that as a basis. So again, kind of doing that wholesome reinforcement. This is beneficial, right? Yeah, in terms of the language. So yeah, I don't know if you had anything you'd like to add on that, Brett, for now.
I was discussing the practice here with another Sangha member, and I was asked to express, because I had asserted that the practice in my life itself, the way I experience many aspects of the lay life, has changed. I mean, it's changed in ways that are difficult to express. And
I think it might be cutting out there.
And the Dhamma, DJ?
Oh yeah, you just were cutting out a little bit for a second.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my Wi-Fi is questionable, so I was hoping it would do better outside, but
it's kind of funny though, because you were just talking about how, sometimes it's difficult to express and then the internet just starts cutting out. It's like really going into that. Yeah, there's a degree where it's like beyond words, right? And yet we can still use like language as sort of that point of momentum to gather the mind together, to collect the mind, to unify the mind, not only within ourselves, because we do that within ourselves, but then as we continue to connect with other practitioners and talk, our language we start to be able to communicate a lot more smoothly. It becomes a lot more organized and harmonious, our language. So I think that's another cool aspect as well.
Yeah. The experience here was such that the Dhamma lives in our hearts, it lives in the body, and knowing that there are other practitioners, for the experience here, it was a point of Siddha, and the faith and the confidence reinforced the rest of the path factors. It helps concentration through wholesome thoughts, arpanya, and then sila as well, which again goes in the circle. In the beginning, our virtue increases our concentration. And as we practice anapanasati, we have insights. These insights allow us to see. And our sati, again, watches over all these factors.
Yeah, that's just it. That sati helps us to remember to take that look and make that change. And so it's really helpful when we get into that space of Sangha because we're, there. It helps to generate that attitude and that spirit, if you will, of Sati. We can kind of come together and remind each other, oh yeah, we can just enjoy taking a breath right now. A nice inhale, and we can recognize that, hey, this is enough right now. And then we can take an exhale and just realize that, hey, you know what? This is all we need right now. This is whole right now. We don't need anything else. Just chilling is enough,
Oh,
And yeah, working with that, very, very easy. Yeah.
we don't always need or have to use memory, but something comes up now in our conversation. We were discussing well, I'll have to let that go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of interesting, yeah, as you have conversations too, like, you might have something kind of come up in the mind and then you like forget it, right? And so even then there can be like a bit of dukkha, like, oh, I've got to remember that thing so that I could share it, right? So being able to have that kind of sati where you can recognize that, and even that sort of more, you could say, subtle form of dukkha is like really, really cool. And this is why like having the pointing of that it's dissatisfaction dukkha is really helpful, because it really does help with the thoroughness of the teachings of the Buddha, because it's very thorough. And by that, I mean it's complete. There is no stone left unturned. Like, that's the beauty of the precision of this practice, is that, yeah, like, all the little things, because you see them as they come up. And that's sort of the interesting things with like insights. We might be like really caught up on like having these big insights, and you might hear that from certain places, right? And I'm not saying that there's like absolutely nothing to those at all. However, I think regardless, one of the most skillful things one can do is simply return to coming back here and now, directly looking at what's going on, and noticing, well, for one, we make a change, right? So that's on one level, we're making a wholesome change. We're applying the right noble effort to abandon the unwholesome and enter upon the wholesome. With that, though, we can, yeah, if we're talking about it from an insighty kind of point of view, we remember, look, there's change, as I'm talking, the words are arising and they're ceasing, they're coming and they're going, all the different sensations are coming and going, right? It's already changing, and we're directing the mind. So that's what I find so beautiful, is that
We're
with
directing
that,
the mind.
yeah.
We're directing the mind, and the mind has a tendency to fictionalize at times, and to do that automatically, or that we feel that we are at the affect of our imaginations. And so we discussed not letting our imagination use us, but rather we use that. We can use our creativity on the path.
Yeah, precisely so. That's a good point to bring up, Brett, is that, yeah, with like the imagination and stuff, it's like, hey, we can, even that's sort of a generation of a wholesome thought right there, for talking about the sort of internal visual thing, where we can bring up images, right? And we can play with that. I like to practice sometimes, and I might have a mantra to go with it, or a phrase that I'll use, like, and Dhammarato will bring this up too when he's talking about practicing metta from that place of a champion, of like, may all beings feel as chill as I do right now, right? But with that, yeah.
All too often, what comes up is that we can't do it.
Yeah.
And when does that come up? When we're alone.
Mm-hmm.
So we need Sangha to remember, to help us remember. Sometimes we forget.
Yeah.
And when we do that, the experience here, and what was so beneficial, seeing Dhammarato and meeting some of you in the Sangha, was, and even temporarily, even if it were to occur now, or even if it occurred recently, the moment I see a friend in the chat, the moment I see your face, all those Mara disappears often. Is Mara was imagination trying to throw off. And I take a look, and you can see that.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier when we have friends.
Yeah, no, that's the thing that's just it. Like when we have friends, it makes it so much easier, right? And that's the thing. It's not about having this practice have to be hard, right? It's actually about doing it the easiest way, right? Because I mean, that's the thing is the Buddha, he did the hard work for us, and that's where we can be really grateful to, the Buddha, and by this I mean Siddhartha Gautama. Like, just thank you so much for sitting under that Bodhi tree and going through all those years of hardcore asceticism and figuring out that none of that worked, so you could figure out the Four Noble Truths, or to recognize them, because he discovered them, right? This is the cool thing with the Four Noble Truths. He discovered them. They're part of reality. They're a part of nature itself, right? When we look, we recognize this. So, yeah. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Brett, you're just breaking up a little bit right now, so might just be a second before you get back stabilized there with the internet. Okay, I think you're looking good now. Yeah, if you did want to talk, Brett, your internet seems good.
We were discussing the Arya Satya and the discovery of the Four Noble Truths, and they are part of the shape of nature as we know it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And that's where we have a real confidence, because we look, as we continue to practice, we're not going like, okay, off of like, well, the Buddha said this, in this part. It's like, no, we're directly looking and understanding for ourselves. We can see right now, well, there's dukkha, right?
Yeah.
We can verify there's dukkha. There's a cause of dukkha, right? Which, we know is like an ignorant, it's ignorance and desire, and those working in tandem together. And we kind of get to the whole thing of, paticca samuppada, dependent origination, which is just something that is very in depth and profound. Welcome, Robert. Glad to see you back on. Awesome.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Great to see you guys.
Hello,
too.
Robert.
I'm nice to meet you, Brett, and great to see you again, DJ. I'm just
Nice to meet
hanging
you.
out here. I'm working on something, but I'm just hanging out. So just listening to all the DJ wisdom
Oh,
in the background here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, and I might pipe in more later, but for now I'll just be observer mode.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Whatever you feel like, what if you're doing something else, like just popping on, it's cool. So yeah, I won't poke you too much for questions or anything.
By the way,
Awesome.
DJ, I really appreciate the nurturing feeling of just being allowed
I'm getting a call
on.
coming in. I just got to jump off. I'll be back. All right.
Yeah,
Talk later.
Bye. All right.
Bye-bye. Yeah, like I was attempting to say through this Wi-Fi situation, I appreciate the flexibility of being able to pop into these calls, because I think in my own mind this formality was arising, and that's just another chill, calming comfort to be able to appear and be welcome, feel welcome.
Yeah, well, no, I'm glad, and again, I appreciate the feedback. What's really cool about this is getting like compliments and people being like, and again, it is for me as somebody who is enthusiastic about the Noble Eightfold Path, hearing that is really warming, right? But then also having the sati to be like, that's also not reliable. So also any attachment towards positive feedback, right? Because that could lead to attachment as well to negative feedback. Neither one is reliable. So both abandoning those and just being like, okay, cool, you know what? But it's good to hear like that, hey, you know what? That can be beneficial.
Right. It wasn't intended to lend itself to Micha Diti at all. It was intended to aid with the facilitation. So the compliment was directed toward the skillful facilitation, not any sense of a person.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing is I can see that in what you are saying, Brett, and that's very skillful, and that's like really on point with what this conversation is about that skillful nurturing, and also like that supporting, each other. Yeah, and being really encouraging and generating that spirit of, hey, we can practice this. It's like beneficial, and that congratulations, that's what we do here. It comes back to that nurturing and that meta. So that's more like on my end, just being aware, right, for that, because that's what I mean in terms of like being really, again, we're open, we're aware, we're awake, we're able to see and move with things, but we can also remain guarded so that we know that, hey, if we do go in that direction, right, that would be, of course, our own ignorance, right? But we watch that to make sure that, hey, we're not getting attached to compliments. We're not comparing ourselves to other people, because it's pointless to compare yourself to other people. Well, yeah, when you compare yourself to other people, not only do you limit your own potential, but you are really starting to get yourself liable for bad feelings, right? For yourself and others, right? So it's just not beneficial. But when we go beyond compare, and I really like this because, as a reminder, I'm quite into, the Heart Sutra, and I will kind of chant it, from memory, the Thich Nhat Hanh translation. But there's a part of it, where, he says, listen, Sariputra, the insight that brings us to the other shore is a great mantra, the most illuminating mantra, the highest mantra, a mantra beyond compare. The true wisdom that has the power to put an end to all kinds of suffering, So that beyond compare, right, is that's what we're looking, right? We're looking and seeing, because that's where that liberation is we're going beyond compare. We don't need to compare each other. And also, we keep coming back to this place of wholeness, of unification, of being satisfied. And this is just satisfying enough, right? We become wholly satisfied here and now, coming back home. Our home is this base camp of the present moment experience, with the breath, with the body, with the feelings, right? With the mind and the mind's object. So I'm kind of going down the 4 foundations here, but we return home. And that's enough. But also, from that place, we continue to still cultivate, we continue to develop, because really, when it comes to skill development here, it can be boundless, right? So we can keep playing it out, but we're not doing it from a place of greed. We're doing it from a place of joyous, just play, right? And it's so much fun to practice the Noble Eightfold Path. And that's something too that I think is really beneficial to encourage, is like that joyful play and investigation and coming back to this, because it is, practicing the Noble Eightfold Path is actually, in a way, more interesting than like any game I've ever played, right?
Yep.
So it's the most interesting one.
What about this? This comes up. What about this? What about, can we be satisfied with this activity of Dhamma while there are still fetters and defilements arising, and we're not satisfied with those? And so there's this experience, a practice of Dhamma and all the rest that you describe so skillfully. And so there are 2 aspects. We are satisfied, grateful for life, for the ability to practice Dhamma. But while we're here, we can continue this.
Yes, I think that it's very helpful, like in that regard, or beneficial, because it's safe, because we establish ourselves here and now. We're satisfied, but we don't become complacent with that either, because we're continuing to develop skills. And that's part of that skill, is actually being able to return to what's happening now and to just be chill with that, right? Because the mind works very, very quickly, right? And so, yeah, we can do that, and we can work on those skills when we're sitting in seclusion. But then, can you do that when you're no longer in seclusion? Can you do that when you are surrounded by various different things, when you're on a busy subway, when you're waiting in line at the grocery store? Can you do that if your partner is watching television really loud? Or can you even do that while watching television? Can you watch television, where there's that thing going on, but still being able to abide in a state which is free from the cravings and clingings to that thing. Well, I would say that you
Yes.
can. It just requires sati and really being aware, and the ability to also break down and see, sensation as merely sensation, right? This is like when we come back to just, hey, it's merely a sensation, and we can choose how we want to feel about that sensation. We can watch television and feel bad about it because we have some rule that we're not supposed to be watching television. We're supposed to be sitting in a cave meditating because that's what enlightenment is, right? And we need to go do that so we can get enlightenment. And so that can be incredibly unwholesome, But if we're like, hey, we're watching television, we're with our partner, right? And we can just be satisfied with this, and we don't get pulled into even the storylines and the dialogues. Or if we do, the point is anytime we get pulled away and we do go kind of into the unwholesome or the mind wanders, right? There's a bit of restlessness. Rather than beating ourselves up and being really cruel to our little monkey, the little monkey mind, we're actually, no, we're being kind, we're being gentle, we're being nurturing. And that's really the skill there too to develop. Yeah.
Sometimes the mind can be more like a squirrel here, but
the squirrel. Yeah. Oh, the squirrel mind. That is the cute. I like that. Yeah, it can be like a squirrel.
Like the squirrel went. There was a song. The squirrel went berserk in the first self-righteous church.
Oh my gosh,
you were talking about. Well, we were discussing our sati sampajanya. This is the same fact.
I think it's just cutting out there again.
There's a lot of difference. I wanted to say something about that. Take us back to the first noble truth. There is suffering. And I think all too often, it's easy for us to attempt to relate to that truth. Most important truth, or at least when we start this practice, through denial.
Yeah.
And we can't do that in practice. We will bypass the very dukkha that composes the second truth, which is often what we're complaining about, our pity party. And I like to think of the first truth as a lamp, a bright light that illuminates the rest of the truths.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
or the way, and number 3.
Yeah. That's a good pointer, because it really does. And we have that gratitude when we remember that first noble truth that, hey, there is suffering. We are liable to suffer or to be dissatisfied. I like to use both, actually, depending on the circumstance. I think they both have their use cases. And so when it comes to dukkha, we are liable to that. So be glad when you recognize that, because you know the way out and you can do that, right? So there's a sense of gratitude, right? But sometimes if we're just like, oh yes, we're completely and totally free from all dukkha forever and ever, and it's not going to get us because we're beyond that, then we go and fall like our face down in it, like, in the dukkha patties, right? And it's like, okay. So then at any point we recognize that, we can get up and be like, oh, cool, we recognize that. Now we can, rather than continuing to be upset about it, and then we just go keep falling patty after patty of dukkha shit. We just we actually
with
can
your
just
sati,
on. Yeah.
With your sati, you can sense the presence of Count Dukkha.
Count Dukkha. Oh my gosh. It's making me think of Count Dooku from Star Wars. Is that the... Oh. Yeah. It's funny, though, because my he's into Star Wars. He's a big Star Wars, like, guy. The whole basement is just, all Star Wars stuff. But it's interesting because, being into Dhamma, I'm like, there's so much, with that where it points towards, like, it's very, it's based a lot of it on like Buddhadasa and all that stuff too. So it's interesting, it's like, oh yeah, so he's got all these different things. It's like, oh yeah, we're kind of practicing the real kind of version of that, so it's kind of cool to have all those like little reminders there. He's got Grogu, or Baby Yoda, right? So he's got that little guy. I think you're familiar with Baby Yoda, right, Brett?
I think from the back, from the rear of car vehicles.
Yeah.
I guess it's supposed to be Baba Yoga. I mean, Yoda.
Yeah, it's like a little...
that was a Freudian type slip.
Yeah. Yeah, I can tell. I think I know where you were going with that. That Freudian type slip. But yeah, when it comes to the baby Yoda, it's so funny because he has it on his truck on the side of it, right? This little baby Yoda pointing out, and the border guards will see it and like be like, "Oh, you have 2, passengers." So he's spreading joy like that. But like I said, it's kind of funny because it's like, oh, there's a little Buddha, right? So. And this is the thing, we could be like, oh, well, you're not supposed to like Star Wars because that's one of those worldly sort of like things, and so we see all these things in the world and we think of ourselves as being above that. I need to have the authentic teaching, right? And so you go to war with the world because you're trying to be like all stuck up, and you can't actually see past to the actual truth because it's so caught up in the appearances and the form still, which is still being trapped within that. Right. So utilizing your situation and kind of transforming it, I'm trying to think of the word for it, transmogrifying it to be your like beneficial for the practice. Right. So working with that.
You had me at transformation.
Yeah.
You didn't have to morgify it, but that's fine with me. Everything's okay. Everything's okay, DJ. Transmogrify all you want to. I would say THX 1138 worked really. It was a PT Sukha party.
Yeah.
I like the movie.
Oh yeah.
It's been a while. But I was gonna say, I guess we'd have to be a baby before we could be Baba.
Yeah.
You have to grow up, and sometimes we forget.
Yeah.
Start again. Oh well.
Never mind. Start again. Yeah. No,
Never mind.
We can be kind to that little, squirrel. That little mental squirrel. Yeah, little baby squirrel. It's funny because now that's making me think of like redoing kind of like a version of Journey to the West with like the monkey. You know how they have the Monkey King, except for it's like a squirrel instead of the Monkey King. So instead of the monkey mind, it's the squirrel mind. I think that would be very poignant in North America because we have more squirrels around here.
It would need to be on. It would need to be on. Excuse me, sir. It would need to be on one of those wheels where it could run in perpetuity in its little rat race. Yeah. And you could have a little piece of cheese outside the wheel dangling that it's chasing in this cyclical process. And then eventually, after it runs long enough, the cheese will turn into
Sorry again, Brian. It keeps cutting out when you start to talk, so it just needs a moment.
Can you hear me, DJ?
I can hear you now, I think. Did it start again? I might still need just a moment to stabilize. I can normally tell because if it's like gonna lag out because you'll be pretty frozen, and then when it sort of stabilizes for you, like I can see you moving a bit more. It's a lot more fluid. So like right now it's still frozen, so if you try talking, it's probably gonna cut out.
If you can hear this, then talk to us about the elements.
Okay, about the elements. Yeah, so this is this is actually a good place because the 4 elements directly correlate to the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And that's what this is about, coming back to the 4 foundations. So we start with the earth element, and the earth element is the body, right? So this is coming back to that sturdy stability and that grounding. So with, the inhale and the exhale, we're grounded here and now, in the present moment. We become aware of the whole body. We relax the whole body, right? So this is a grounding. This is the earth element. Now I'm going to move up to the third foundation of mindfulness, right? Which is kind of how we're do it in this practice, right? So this is how we practically practice it a bit more, which is the third, which is the mental state, right? So this would be actually fire, right? So the mind is fire. So Dhammarato pointed out this one song, like when the heart is, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but when it's fueled with desire, there's like, it kind of goes into that, right? But the point is that the mind is fire. So this is where the brightening could be really helpful too. We're gladdening the mind, we're brightening the mind, we're illuminating the mind, right? That's that fire element with the mind. And then the feelings. Well, the feelings are water. They're flowing feelings, right? And this is especially with sukha, right? Sukha can be like a flowing feeling of returning back home to cooling waters, right? And then the piti is like like a geyser gushing up, right? Of just, right? So I'm like, wow, right? But then we come back to that sort of stilling more and more of the streams. That's the sukha, right? And then that's the water element, right? And then we could even bring in, with the other parts of like steps 7 and 8, or I say step, but they're more like items, right? Those are our sankharas, becoming aware of the sankharas, and also becoming aware or releasing, right, or letting go or stilling those sankharas can almost be seen as, well, there's a bunch of stuff muddying the water, right? And so we become aware of those because that's all the past stuff. It's muddying that experience. We become aware of it and we release it. We let it go. We clear up the water. It's almost like a water filtration system, right? So this is going with the feelings. Now I'm going to move on to the fourth element, which actually, funny enough, not to get all astrological or whatever, but I'm a Gemini, so I have a little bit of a thing when it comes to the wind and sound and all that stuff. I'm not saying it has anything to do with that, but it's kind of funny to think about because I do kind of incline here, right? So the fourth element is wind, right? Or is that air element. So even this is the breath, but this is in Anapanasati, we're talking about anicca, right? Everything is changing. It's all in a state of flux. We can bring to mind, the Kansas song, dust in the wind. All we are is dust in the wind. Same old song, just a drop of water in an endless sea. It kind of goes on, but dust in the wind. Yeah. So working with that and recognizing, hey, everything's changing, everything is fading away, everything is ending, right? It's all dying. Those are those items, like 13, 14, and 15, right? And then finally, the release, the giving up, right? Throwing it as this is so beautiful. Is Bhikkhu Buddhadasa says, throwing it back to nature. We were a thief all along, so we give it all back to nature. And so these elements can just sort of flow, right? And that air element, that's that thing where it goes with that flowing, that breathing of it. And now that's looking at within the context of Anapanasati. And what's really cool is if we kind of have, and I like to practice it like a spiral. So we have it with that in terms of the different items of Anapanasati, but then we can also examine, it from the Satipatthana direction, with the sutta that talks about 4 foundations of mindfulness. So if we're talking about the 4th foundation of mindfulness, or the 4th foundation of remembrance, or to remember, I kind of like the 4th foundation to remember, bringing it back to memory. It is the objects of mind, right? So we have things like, it starts off with the 5 hindrances. So we can become aware of the absence of the hindrances. Oh, wow, it sure is nice to be free from hindrance right now. Can be really helpful for being able to spot the hindrances. And when they do arise, like, you can't be free from X hindrance right now. Say, oh, well, there's doubt right there, right? And so you spot the doubt. Well, there you go. Can you doubt that there's doubt, right? So that's the thing. That can be a helpful practice. Or moving on to the aggregates. It talks about the 5 aggregates, which, interesting enough, is more of an accurate thing. Not accurate, but it's kind of even taking the 4 foundations in and kind of taking it into a different direction a little bit. But it's very similar to the 4 foundations, So with the 5 aggregates, right, we kind of get deluded into thinking we're this body, this separate body. We think that we're the feelings, right? So the feeling tones that come and go, like I like it, I don't like it. We think those are I, me, or mine. The perceptions, we get, duped into the feeling that we're the perceptions. So my perception of what this body even is, or the separation point of this body, that somehow knowing that perception is, that container is myself, right? Or that the habit patterns are I, me, or mine, or myself. So like that, my habitual tendencies are me, and we can do that quite a bit. We'll be like, oh, I'm so angry, I'm so, impatient, I'm so, right? So we have all these different things and we put I am in front of it. Well, that's just not true. Those things can change. And are they actually here and now like that? Or are you concocting a story, right? So being able to notice that and recognize that even that process of concocting is not a permanent separate self, right? So recognizing that. And then finally, and this is where I talk about the thoroughness and no stone left unturned when it comes to the practice of the Buddha Dhamma, it's complete. Consciousness, being aware of the senses, right? So just, and that really goes to being aware, because what are you going to be aware of that's beyond the senses? You can't really be aware of that, right? So this is like, that's the point. Because as soon as you kind of come up with something, you're aware of an object within those senses, right? So that's the thing, is this sort of bare knowing, though, is even non-self. That's just that sort of input device, right? So, it's interesting because Dhammarato will talk about light switches having consciousness, right? Because they know when they're turned off and on, right? Does that mean that there's going to be all these thought patterns and all that stuff coming up? No, because they don't have the functionality of like the sankharas and all these other different things going on, right? So that's sort of thing, interesting. Yeah.
And we experience life as if an arrow fired through the play of opposites, not knowing it's our hand on a string. We flail through these pairs of disparate dichotomies, not knowing our hand holds the flail. Could it be that?
Yeah. Well, you know what? You're kind of, I think, pointing right here to that point, and this is what the Heart Sutra brings up too, is like emptiness is form and form is emptiness. Emptiness is not other than form, and form is not other than emptiness. Yeah, because so we say all this, right? That doesn't mean that there's not a person here holding a hand, right? Or not holding a hand, that has a hand here that's waving it like this. This doesn't mean that there isn't even a self on that level. But on the ultimate level of things, no, it's interconnected. We're all interconnected. We are the whole, my friend. I like that. Like, really, right? Because it comes back to like the whole Dhammakaya. But even then, we throw any conception of what that is, we throw it all back to nature, right? But in that way, then we be able to come back to, this person, right, that kind of comes in due to all these different conditions, and we can relate to it in such a different sort of way, in such a beautiful way, where we're like really fully present here, and there isn't that same degree of suffering. Or when we really see it, there's no suffering. There can't be that dissatisfaction when we truly understand anatta, right? But it's not something where it's like, oh, I don't use the word I, and so therefore, I have understood anatta. It's like, no, so
there's still fear.
Yeah, there's still fear. Cases. Yeah. So I think
that's Mara's Seventh Army, isn't it not? Is cowardice not Mara's Seventh Army?
Yeah, actually, I think you're a little bit more knowledgeable on that one, but you know what? That sounds about right. So, maybe. Yeah. Well, it's funny though. You know what? You say that fear is Mara's Seventh Army, and it makes me think of the White Stripes song. I'm gonna hold, Seven Nation Army couldn't hold me back. I like to use songs too, right? So that sort of thing of like, hey, you know what? The one who is truly established here and now, who is ardent, they can fend off easily. They can just sit there and be like, no, I'm not going to be swept away by the 7 armies of Mara, right? 7 Nation Army, they couldn't hold me back, right? So having that spirit of that confidence of, hey, we can do this. So, I mean, whether or not you're kind of going the whole, and sometimes this can be a bit of a dichotomy that doesn't have to be there, but with the Theravada and like the Arahant, who is just like so like confident, that lion attitude of like, no, I know for dead certain it doesn't matter what this person thinks, I don't need anything from them to confirm anything. Or the Bodhisattva, so you have the rather than being a whiny little Bodhisattva, you have a badass Bodhisattva who's like, I can go into the world, I can handle this, right? I've got this, I can do this, I'm doing this because not only for myself but for all beings. I'm coming back here and I'm like, I can do this. It's funny too, because like thinking about the Bodhisattva and relating that to Western culture and media, I think about Gandalf. And if you're familiar with that story,
Of
and
course.
he comes back. Yeah, Gandalf the White, right?
Gandalf
He was
the Grey.
Yeah, he's Gandalf the Grey.
Mithrandir.
Yeah.
Mithrandir.
Yeah. And so it's kind of funny because he was great. So maybe he was a little bit more wishy-washy. He's like, okay, I'm kind of going off. But he comes back as Gandalf the White. He's certain. He's like, okay, and then he comes back until his task is done, right? So this is kind of like that thing. He comes back into the world, because, hey, there's...
Paragate, Parasamgate.
Yeah.
He's gone beyond. He has gone far, far beyond.
Yeah.
He is founded in awakening.
Awakening, hail. Yeah. Gone beyond, gone utterly beyond, awakening, hail. That's one of the ways. What's so cool about that phrase, that mantra, we can practice that fourth, multiple different parts, but that fourth part of Anapanasati, well, we do that. So like on the inhale, we can practice with a part, and on the exhale, we can practice with a part. So we can be like, gate, gate, and then exhale, paragate, then inhale, parasamgate, and then exhale, bodhiswaha. And so with that, yeah.
My battery is Anicca. It's 9%.
Yep. That is the way of things, isn't it? Well, I think that's okay. That's a cool place to leave it. But I was just going to say that could be the practice right there. And we noticed the change, right, in the sound and all that. And you just noticed the Anicca in the phone. The phone is Anicca, right? So, and you can go beyond that because you don't need to care if the phone is like losing charge. You can just be like, hey, that's okay. And we can appreciate what we have. We just had a wonderful conversation for the past 44 minutes. So it's been really good. And yeah, so if you want to get going so you can take care of that, like, yeah, this is a good conversation. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for being my friend, Brett. And I just appreciate it so much. And thank you. Yeah. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami. And then Sangham saranam gacchami. Taking refuge, in the 3 jewels, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Thank you so much, Brett. All right. I think that's a good place to leave it. All right. Enjoy.